I'll call us to order at 6:35 this evening. Our consent agenda this evening includes our previous minutes and the one policy. Does anybody want to make a motion or have thoughts about that?
I'll make a motion to pass the consent agenda.
Before
Okay.
we vote, I have a question on the policy, and I guess, Lynn, this would be directed toward you. Do you, since it's a pretty significant policy change, if I assume that it can be tweaked if we get into the first year and find that there's some unanticipated kind of aspects that we hadn't, I mean, it seems as though you all were very thorough in trying to anticipate all the potential scenarios. But if, for instance, there's something that comes up related to the in-district transfer, will we have the ability to tweak it, look at it again, change a particular aspect that we might not have envisioned?
That is a great question, Mary. And the answer is absolutely yes. We have our monthly policy committee whose job it is to continue to evaluate the effectiveness of our policies. So this will be up for a regular review. And whenever we find a policy that there's something that isn't working quite right within the policy, we can bring that back to the policy committee at any time. And that committee makes the recommendations to the board. So they would show up under your policy agenda if something, if we haven't considered something that we really should under this policy. Which in all of this work, there's always that potential when you're developing new policies and procedures for anything really, but there is that revision process that's available to us.
Okay, thanks, Lynn.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or thoughts about the policy? Any other thoughts or concerns about the minutes? Okay, shall we all vote on Lisa's motion? Okay, I'll start with Emily.
Aye.
Mary,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes. Sorry.
that's okay, and Kat?
Sorry, yes.
Okay, and John?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any prioritization or reorganization to our agenda this evening? Lynn, I'm asking you primarily.
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
I would
So
just
let's-
say that you can take David Carpenter. He's listed under my agenda, but as a visitor, you can take him under visitors, and then he doesn't have to sit through the whole thing.
Perfect. So we have David from Green Lantern, and then I know, Anne, were you here just to listen, or did you have questions for us, or a topic at hand, or, I'm sorry, I forget the other folks that were with us.
I'm just here to listen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anne, and forgive me, I know there's another family that's with us this evening.
Robert and Debbie Tower from Berkshire.
Thank you. Did you folks have something in particular you were here for? We love having visitors, so I'll take that as a no, you're here to listen. And I'm gonna move ahead with Dave, who has something he wants to talk to us about. Thank you, Dave.
Sure. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yes, I see nodding. Okay, great. So every one of these is a new adventure in how I'm going to screw things up or not hit the mute button or I knocked my computer off my desk at one point, so that was. I am general counsel for Green Lantern Solar. It's the company that you all get net metering credits for from at the current point. I had been talking to Morgan about the potential for putting together a proposal for the district to bring some other schools in. So I just wanted to touch base with you folks first, let you know that that's sort of in the works. I've pulled all the bills from VEC. Lisa Morris was very helpful. We got access to the GMP bill portal. And so we've got the schools all the information that we need. So what I would like to do is put together a proposal that allow the schools that aren't currently on the program to get brought in. We currently have an array in VEC territory that we've done a little bit of rejiggering with to allow some other folks onto that array. As a current customer, we wanted to give you all the first run at it. So I just wanted to sort of tee that up for you. We're still sort of crunching some of the numbers, so I don't have a solid proposal to put in front of you right now that says X number of dollars and X number of kilowatt hours. But I did want to present myself, give you the option to ask me any questions up front. If you understand the net metering program or you've never heard of it before, I can see if I can answer any of those questions so that when I put together, sorry, I'm outside my yard, I just got a gnat in my eye. So I can put together a proposal that addresses any questions that you might have up front. So I would just open the floor to anybody to ask me whatever they're looking for. Morgan can answer questions from his perspective from the business side of things. But like I said, I'm here to try to answer questions and sort of let you guys all make a decision when we put a proposal in front of you.
This is Mary. I'm not sure what memo I missed, but I feel completely kind of out of the loop. I'm not understanding the context of this net metering conversation. And are we talking about putting solar arrays on some of these schools in the district? Is that what this is born of?
Yeah, no. What and I probably should have prefaced this. I know that board members, come and go, and some folks are new to the whole.
I'm definitely not new to the board.
Okay.
I feel very out of the loop though about this conversation.
So part of the reason is that the schools where we have net metering agreements in place are the two Richford schools and the 3 Enosburg schools, and they're in a different district under a different board. So the schools that the board members here oversee, none of them currently have net metering agreements. We did try to get something up in Bakersfield a few years ago. I think Aaron and Jean Marie were probably around for that. It was a little bit different in that we were going to host the solar panel on the school, and the structural engineering study came back suggesting that that might not be the best idea. So this program is a little bit different in that there are solar arrays built elsewhere in the utility territories. They are allowed to tie the credits that they generate to any meter on within that territory. And so in Richford, for example, the actual array is somewhere over in the Northeast Kingdom, I believe. Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong. In Enosburg, in the village, which has its own power company, the array is right in the village, but it's sitting on a different property than what the school owns. And so it's a little bit different than a traditional solar project, which we've also done in Richford, where we plant solar panels on the roof, and it's just tied directly to our meter, and we get the electricity generated from that. Dave, I don't know if that's a good kind of dumbing down to my level explanation of it.
That's right around the same level that I operate. I mean, basically what the net metering program allows people to do is let me back up one step, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this because I know you guys have other business, but it used to be a net metering project was a project that went on a building. It went in, the electricity went into your building, spun your meter back, and if you generated more than you used, that went out into the grid and the utility would actually pay you cash for that. Well, the utility doesn't want to pay cash and hasn't for years. So what they do is they will give you a credit. Now, the nice thing about that credit for every kilowatt hour that you generate is that you can then sell it, you can use it later, you can do whatever you want with it. So what we do as a company is we build projects and that allows people to obtain these credits at a discount off of their face value without having to do the building, the maintenance. You don't have to have a roof, you don't have to have property, you don't have to do that capital investment. So we do that. There's plenty of investors who are interested in it from a funding standpoint. And then we sell the credits to schools and towns throughout the state. We currently have, I want to say, 50 municipal and school customers throughout the state. We've got 90 projects. They're all over the place. Some of them are in VEC's territory. A lot of them are in GMP's territory. So that's what the net metering program basically allows you to do is purchase credits from us. We tell GMP, send them to that bill, and then your bill goes way down, and you end up saving, you know, between 9 and 11% on whatever your bill is over the course of the year. The other nice thing about net metering credits is the thing about schools in particular is that your greatest generation from a solar panel is in the middle of the summer when there is nobody in the school. So if you're just rolling your meter back in the summer, that doesn't really help you. Net metering credits mean we can take those credits from the summer and apply them in the middle of winter when all your heat's on, all your lights on, everything's running full steam. So that's basically sort of an overview of how the program works.
And Mr. Carpenter, is everything generated by solar? Are there no other power generation sources that your company, that Vermont Electric Co-op gets the credits from? I
think there may be one or two wind projects in the net metering program. Wind has not been a very popular renewable resource in Vermont. Everybody has a different opinion on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But as far as VEC's territory goes, you know, the Georgia Wind Project and the Kingdom Community Wind Project, those are all, none of those are obviously are net metering projects. But there's very few other net metering projects other than solar ones right now. Does that answer your question? That does answer my question. I guess I have some concerns going forward in the far future about solar. Mm-hmm. It's not exactly, it's sort of like wind. It's not exactly reliable in Vermont. And I just wonder about how long we'll be tied into this. Maybe this is more of a question for Morgan, how long we would be obligated to be in this agreement. Yeah, the way the agreements usually work is that because the agreements are tied to the bank financing, and the bank financing is usually 20 years, the agreements are usually 20 years long. So that's how that works. I'm not, and again, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not sure what you mean by reliability. Vermont has a fairly typical, fairly steady generation curve. It vary widely. I mean, obviously we're not Nevada, but the production we've seen has not been something that's got us all pulling our hair out. So you know, we're building these because they work. You know, and it's not really a terribly risky venture. I mean, like anything, there's obviously some risk built in, but reliability is not really one of the things we've had to deal with.
Thank you.
Sure.
Dave, can you clarify for me? So if in this arrangement, individual schools
Mm-hmm.
are not putting arrays on each of the buildings, we're essentially, so we maintain our connection with Vermont Electric Co-op and the
Yep.
power that you all from your arrays around the region generate
Mhm.
is kind of essentially going into the grid. And so we're still obviously on grid power that is coming from these photovoltaic arrays.
That's correct.
But when you're talking about the kind of the contract obligation in 20 years, if we're not investing in a loan to put a massive array on the individual buildings, are we investing in the arrays that you all are erecting in various areas around the state?
No. The way we look at it is that the schools, the towns, which are primarily who we contract with, are our customers. We have a thing that generates widgets, and those widgets happen to be kilowatt hours, and we need to sell those to people. And so we sell them to schools and towns primarily. We sell them at a discount off the face value of them, but there's no obligation with regard to the array. There's no operations, no maintenance. It's simply we are selling you these things, and then we're telling GMP to apply those credits to your bill, and that's the whole agreement. I think, Morgan, you probably got one. I know you have one that folks could take a look at, and I'm happy to send you just sort of a draft blank version of one that we would use. It's a standard contract that we use, so you could see what's in it in terms of obligations.
Yeah, I can certainly send one of the ones from Richford, which is the most recent one. I think we've signed up around to board members to look at. The way that I try to wrap my head around it is that if we want to be using solar in some way, the two options available to us, as I see it, would be that we could build the array and own it and collect all of the credits for that and collect all the benefit for that electricity. But it comes with the requirement of maintaining it, which I think in Richford we're finding out is not as simple as we hoped for the project we have at the high school. So maintaining it, you're also kind of hit with the upfront cost of putting that array up. In Richford, we had a grant that significantly reduced the initial cost for that, so it made sense there. In this case, you have no obligation, as I understand it, to the array. You're basically just saying for the next 20 years, we're going to sell you our solar credits, and the benefit to the school is going to be X percent or X dollars.
Is
That's
that
correct.
locked in?
I'm sorry?
Is the savings locked in as far as if you say, okay, we're obligated for 20 years and we're going to save, X percentage? Like, is it locked in any sense, or is it variable?
Yeah. No, well, the rate is locked in, and I keep losing video, so I hope you all can still hear me. The rate is locked in when the permit for the array is granted. So that's how.
Did we lose him?
So he's having trouble with audio. My understanding is that the percentage is locked in over those 20 years, and it's tied to the amount of credit that is generated. So there's a little bit less payback, assuming that in 20 years the panels become less efficient. But in terms of the portion of the credit we're getting, that's going to be fixed over the life of the agreement.
Yeah, and the rate, if Morgan, can you guys hear me? Is that better? Yeah, okay, good. The rate is locked in when you get the permit for the facility. And then every year that rate has been, the rate that is granted at the permit level has been changing. So every year the rate has gone down and down and down a little bit. But the rate that you're that you can sell those credits as locked in when you get the permit. So we've got 3 projects right now that are under construction in GMP territory. We have 4 projects that are in VEC territory that have been tied up because of, again, I don't want to get down into the weeds too far, a constraint in the northern part of the state that doesn't allow power to flow through very well. So we're all sort of stuck. But those projects do have their benefits locked in.
Question, Dave. I assume at the kind of commercial industrial scale of these arrays that you all have the generating capacity that even with high energy use like we see in our schools, you can meet that 100% capacity, or are there times of lower production in the darker, cloudier months? I mean, my only experience is having a pretty significant array on our roof at home, and we often have credits, but not always. Our electric load does sometimes in the winter exceed our generation capacity, even with a entire southern exposure roof generating power for us. But at this scale, would the schools be 100% operational on this, on solar power from these arrays, even in the winter?
Yeah, the way we have a couple of people in our company whose job it is to make sure that we aren't overcommitting or undercommitting the amount of credits that are going to various customers, right? Because we don't want to leave them stranded. So we've got a group down in Brattleboro that handles just that, so the short answer is we would not contract with you to do 100% of what your generation is, simply because there's fluctuations up and down in generation years. Sometimes it's just cloudy all summer long. Sometimes the school's usage goes up, sometimes the school's usage goes down. I think we're all experiencing the last couple of months where school's usage has gone way down. So that's been an interesting hiccup. But other than that, yes, we take great pains to make sure that we are calibrating everybody's usage so that we don't overcommit or undercommit. But that's a good question. And again, the nice thing about the year-round usability of these credits is that if we have arrays that generate a ton in the summer, but we don't have to allocate them all in the middle of the summer. We can hang on to them and allocate them in the winter. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Mr. Carpenter, I have another question. Yes. I think sure. Mary just touched on my reliability question, clarified that in terms of weather-related usage or generation. My next question is about transmission. Are the routes of transmission guaranteed to be there and to last for 20 years? I mean, if new agreements are made by utilities, are we guaranteed to have a way of getting that transmission to our schools?
Yeah, as long as you are, because these are grid-tied projects, as long as you are getting electricity from VEC, you will be able to get credits from these arrays. And as long as the arrays are tied into the grid, we will be able to send net metering credits into the grid. The way the net metering program works is that we have to provide all of the grid upgrades, the distribution grid upgrades that are required to interconnect. So all of our interconnections are like new. VEC may have some old lines, but they're gonna continue to try to service their customers. That's for sure. So that's not a major concern of ours. That suddenly the schools won't be able to get electricity anymore. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I was mainly concerned about agreements between the various parties, not necessarily physical equipment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having a hard time imagining a scenario in which we would not be able to deliver power to the grid and the school would not be able to receive power from the grid. That seems like that would be a pretty remote possibility.
Okay, I'm just asking because 20 years is a really long time to lock into something. Thank you.
Understood. Nope, no problem. Thank you.
Other questions for Dave?
Okay. For those of you who like spreadsheets, I will make sure that there's a spreadsheet attached so you can follow all of our math when we present this to you. If it weren't for spreadsheets, I would be a hopeless case in terms of doing the calculations that need to be done. So I will make sure that you guys get that over the next couple of weeks. Morgan, you and I can touch base. Anna Bowler is a woman down in our employee down in Brattleboro who handles the billing and so on and so forth. And our hope is we'll be able to get the VEC projects onto the array that is operating now. So you would be able to start getting credits immediately and not have to wait for construction to finish. So with that, I will sign off. I thank you all very much for your time. And I've said this to every school board I've appeared in front of, because I have two kids, one in middle school and one in, actually both of them are in middle school now, that you guys have all done an amazing job, the staff and the boards. I was on our school board. My term just ended last year. It's been a hell of a ride for you all over the last 3 or 4 months, and the schools have done an amazing job. So thank you all very much for everything you guys have been doing. I know it can't have been easy, and I'm glad I'm not on my school board anymore. So thank you all very much. Have a great night.
Thanks. You
Thanks.
too.
Thanks for joining
again,
us,
folks.
Dave.
Take care now.
Thanks. Okay, so I think you didn't need a motion. That was really just informational, Morgan, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. If everyone's okay, we can move on to Lynn's report.
Okay, so I think his closing comment was a good segue to my discussion around the COVID-19 response in FNESU. So we're wrapping up the 1920 school year, and as you all know, we've been in around 3 months of a reactive school closure. So we have not had any time, we didn't have any time to prepare, we didn't have any time to be proactive in terms of how we could plan out shifting to a remote learning platform. So we're shifting gears now away from this having it be less around the reactive place where we have been, and more about the what can we learn from this time period. So we've been gathering information from students and parents and teachers during this time about what are some of the things that have been working really well, and what are some of the things that are big struggles, and what can we do to be able to move forward. So we are just beginning to unpack all of that. I sent you a message letting you know about the end of the school year. So we received a waiver from Secretary French, so we were able to turn our snow days into professional development days. So we are shifting next week. The last student day will be June 10th. That will allow us to have 4 professional learning days with our teachers. So the principals will be doing much of the work within buildings, and the primary focus is about preparing for next year, really taking a deep look at what has happened this year, really looking at it all the way from the student level to the system level, to think about, who are the kids during this time period that didn't engage, and trying to work together to unpack why that was, why they were not engaging. And groups will be planning within schools to figure out how they can work collaboratively to re-engage those kids in the fall. And they also will be working hard to think about systems approach for identifying what those major priority standards are that all kids need to know and understand, and figuring out how, as a system, we will be able to flexibly respond no matter what framework we're in, whether it's in person or if we're remote, thinking more systematically around how best to support all those learners. So it's not little work, as you can imagine. It's a lot of really big work. It is definitely tied to the work that we were already doing around looking at the multi-tiered systems of supports that exist within our buildings. And it's also really about unpacking all of the priority standards that we had already been working on. And then it's about making sure that we can kind of piece it all together to support our kids. It's probably not the best summary I've ever given on that work, but I look forward to getting out of this phase that we're in now and being able to think forward to what it can be when we have some time to plan to make this better. So I'm going to shift now into end of the year celebrations, and I'll let the principals talk a little bit about how they're celebrating their students at the end of the year. So could we just maybe have each principal share their plans? I know that they have been working together and have shared that. Do you guys want me to talk first, or are you kind of ready to? Yeah, I'm springing this on. Sandy's ready.
Want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are planning our celebration on Tuesday evening, June 9th. And all the students are meeting in their individual vehicles at the Public Safety Building for a parade through town. And so they'll all be in decorated vehicles, hopefully. We have the fire department that's leading and ending that parade as well. So there'll be a slow progression down Main Street, and then they will end up in the school parking lot. Only vehicles with students and one extra vehicle will be allowed in the parking lot for the celebration. At that time, it's just going to be very simple. We will call one student at a time out of the vehicle to come and get their packet, which will include their diploma, their gift, which is a book and a pen, and there's a couple of other things. We have an ice cream certificate. It's just a little packet of things, and we're making them each an individual cake that says congratulations with their name on it that will be boxed. So we usually do cake and punch at the end. So since we can't do that, we're sending them home with their own little graduation cake. So that's pretty much it. The family will be allowed to get out of the vehicle and take some pictures while their student is out. And then when that family goes back in, the next one will be called out. And we only have 11. So it'll be pretty quick. We do have one guest speaker, Christina Bowen. When she was teaching kindergarten and she was teaching multi-age back when they were young. So she had them 3 years in a row, this class, anyone that's been with us for that length of time. So she will be doing a little speech as a guest speaker. So quick and simple, and off they go. So, but I think that they're pretty excited about decorating their cars and driving down Main Street. And we're trying to get businesses and people to come out to Main Street to cheer them on and make posters and so forth. That's it.
Sandy, I have a question. Is something going to go out then to sort of the rest of the school so that we can all line the streets to cheer them on?
Absolutely. That's going out in a newsletter to families on Friday.
Okay, cool.
So we don't want to put it out too early because we don't want people to forget. So it will go out on Friday, and then I'll do a reminder on Facebook as well on Monday.
You'll be reminding them about appropriate physical distancing. We want to cheer, but we want to comply with all of our guidelines.
Absolutely. We had a parade earlier, and we did that same thing. We said anyone that comes out, remember to follow blah, blah, blah. So we always make sure we include that. And I think it'll be nice. And I think that the businesses downtown will put things on their signs and things like that. I'm going to be calling like Phineas Swan, and I'm going to talk to Sarita at the Salt Cave. They all have signs. Donnie, they have signs that they can put things up. I'm going to talk to each one of them and see if we can get something like that happening. So it'll be festive.
All right. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next. We also are doing a parade. It's going to be an end of the year parade, but part of it will be to honor our 8th graders. So that's starting at 3 o'clock on the 9th as well. And we'll be going down through town. We hope to either have every car or different cars with the students' picture and a sign on it, or to have the kids in it themselves. We've asked them all and put that out, but we aren't so sure if everyone's going to be able to be there, but we will have all their pictures on a car and to honor them. And then at 7 o'clock that same evening, we're sending out our virtual graduation that we've put together. It's a whole video long of all the pieces that we would normally do in person, but we've put it together in a virtual way that will be going out to everybody to watch and to see. Earlier that day, also, the middle school teachers are going to be going to each house and dropping off their certificate and a little gift basket of stuff. And we hope to film that and put it in quickly to that bigger video if we can make that happen. But they'll be going out around to each house, and I know they've been trying to figure out exactly when to do that and talking with each family. That's all the little pieces, and hopefully it'll come together on Tuesday night, that Tuesday night.
All right, Christy or Lenny?
I can go. Ours is similar in some ways. We just hung a banner on the ball field fence on 105. So if you drive by, you can see it. It's a big picture of all the students, so not individuals, but it was a group shot, and it looks fabulous. So that was the first thing we did. On the 11th, from 5 to 8, we will have a very small parade of people going to each individual house. We just finished doing the route for that. We have a decorated bag and some balloons, and with their certificate, awards, a couple small things that we're doing for them. And then our parent group always buys them high school sweatshirts, so those are in there too. So we'll deliver those. All the middle school teachers are going, and then there'll be a few other teachers, ones that maybe had them earlier. And we I sent an invitation out to all the families so they know, and we put on it that if they're inviting their family, just know that we're following all the physical distancing and wearing of the mask. Let them know that. And then we have put together a series of videos of everyone giving out the awards, and splice them together. There's a slideshow and music, and so that'll be shared as well, which I'm sure we'll share on social media too.
Okay, Lenny.
So we're doing some similar stuff to Sheldon, where we've worked on putting together like a digital photo yearbook type thing that we're going to send out. And that'll be timed up with when we also send out a video where the teachers have filmed giving out their awards, both the unified arts teachers, classroom level stuff, and then some bigger traditional awards that students earn. So we're going to kind of do a digital video ceremony of us giving out the awards, and those two things will be sent out to be watched at a designated time that's going to line up with when we do our all-school parade. And what we're doing is, we haven't nailed down a time specifically. We were kind of waiting for a little bit of guidance what the end of the year was going to look like for teachers and some of the other work we have to make sure we kind of picked a day that didn't conflict with other things. We decided that we're going to actually wrap in this 8th grade celebration parade with also our whole school end of the year goodbye parade, because a lot of the other teachers, we figured it would make sense for them to have an opportunity to say goodbye to their kids as well. So what we'll do is we'll do a parade in which we will all be stopping at the various 8th grade homes to drop off those certificates that we've announced those awards to via the movie. But we also will have all the other teachers who are available going along, saying goodbye to anybody else who wants to be out on the parade route. We'll post that parade route and the time as well, along with the expectations for proper social distancing. And then I think that's, we also did the same thing with getting the 8th graders their sweaters that match the corresponding high school that they're going to be heading off to.
So I should have started this conversation by saying the guidelines for end of the year celebrations have been complex, and they have evolved 4 times. Our latest guidance came last Thursday. And I know, I understand why. It has just made the planning for these end of the year celebrations really complicated. So I just want to applaud the teachers, the principals, well, and the teachers and staff for being as creative as they can be. This is, you know, I know people are going above and beyond to celebrate kids any way they can. And I know I certainly appreciate it. And I hear it about it from members of the community who also appreciate it. So thank you to all of you. I do want to just tip about the high school graduation ceremonies, because typically there is a role for the sending districts at those high school graduation ceremonies, and that part is going to be different this year because of the strict guidelines. So Enosburg, they began their graduation process last Thursday and Friday, and they filmed virtual graduations for each of their individual students. Students received a mock diploma and any awards they were getting. On Saturday the 13th, they will have a release of a video presentation of that graduation, and it'll have all the traditional components of a graduation. We'll encourage families to have a watch party in their homes with their families, and then they will come back to the school and they will have a drive-through graduation ceremony so that each child can drive up, get their actual diploma. They'll follow it up with a parade through the community to end as well, that typical Dairy Day parade route. For Richford, there's the guidelines were really strict, and when we first began planning, we thought that our 2 high schools would end in a really similar place, and what we found was that Richford's class is around 1/3 the size of Enosburg's class. So they had the capacity to do it a little differently than Enosburg did, just because of the number of cars that were going to be involved. So Richford will be held Friday the 12th. Their ceremony will be live but different. So they'll be beginning at the high school. They'll have a parade route that will go out through their town. They'll end up back at the elementary school, and it'll be very strict for both high schools in terms of how many cars will be coming on property. We had to be very strict about those limits. They will have designated parking areas that will be pre-measured and lined. They will line up in kind of a horseshoe, and there will be a stage with just a few people on it. And they will run a live graduation ceremony at Richford, following all of the physical distancing and the mask requirements and group sizes as well. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. It is not, the high schools did not want to have any board members think that they didn't want you to be involved. It's just been very, very complicated to figure out how to remain within the guidelines. So for this year, we won't have space to be able to have all of the board members who are typically involved in those graduation ceremonies. So it will just be one of the ERUUSD board members for each of those celebrations. Any questions about any of the end of the year stuff?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to thank the principals for being so creative. I love how everybody's doing something a little different, but it's so amazing what you're doing for the kids.
I know they've worked really hard on that. I appreciate that too. So we are, as I told you in the beginning, we're waiting to shift into our planning for what comes next, planning for summer and planning for fall. And, you know, we're in this waiting mode for guidance, which we have been throughout this process, because there's not been a blueprint for how to navigate a pandemic in our schools. So We know that there is going to be guidance that's coming from the agency, and we believe that they are collaborating with other groups, certainly the Department of Health. What we do have is some recommendations that came out from the CDC, and I did link those in your agenda so that you could take a look at it. So I think most people's reactions when they first look at that CDC guidance is a little bit mind-blowing, because I think that when we think about structures and we think about, you know, the historical construct of what schools typically look like, this kind of flies in the face of it. So there's so many of the limitations that are out. CDC guidance makes it really clear that school's not going to look like it traditionally looks. So when we're thinking about summer, I'll start there, we're really having to think small. We're having to think a lot about things we've never had to think about. We're having to think about health screenings. We're having to think about keeping entrances separate and keeping kids in small enough groups so that they meet the maximum number capacity that's outlined in that guidance, and making sure that those pods of kids are not interacting with one another. So it's the opposite of what we typically try to do. But that's so that we can maintain the health and safety measures that are outlined there. So we're working really hard to make some live in-person summer programming happen through our 21st Century After School program. Not a lot of places are trying at this point to have it be a live program. We still think that we can work really hard. We have almost a month before they begin, and we think that we can be ready. We are finding that we're having some issues with supply chains with some of the materials that we do need for the summer. So if, you know, within the next week or so, we're feeling like we don't have what we need in order to ensure the health and safety of our students and staff, we will shift. We have some contingency plans that are already developed. So our summer staff has worked through the what can we do if we're fully in person, what can we do if we're only partially in person and partially remote, and what can we do if we have to shift to entire remote. So that's kind of the place we're at for summer. We have made the decision that we're not doing any transportation for summer programming. As you can see from that guidance, the transportation restrictions are significant. So it is one person to a seat, kind of every other seat, alternating space. So we've taken that off the. So again, the focus there will be on the small groups. I know some of you are very interested in, oh, go ahead. I'm sure who said
Lynn,
that.
I'm sorry for the interruption. The guidance you're talking about, is this from the state or the CDC recommendations? Because in the agenda, that wasn't an actual live link, so I wasn't able to click over to see the CDC recommendations.
Oh, geez, I didn't realize that. I apologize. So that we have some guidance from the agency on summer, and we have some CDC guidance. We know there'll be more coming for the fall, but we believe that the fall guidance we're going to get, Mary, is going to, a lot of what the CDC has recommended will drive some of those decision points for the fall. So I apologize. You actually working live link to that CDC guidance. Would it be helpful if I try to give you kind of a high level overview of that? Or do you want to read it?
That would be great. I mean, I've been hearing kind of a fair amount about the transportation piece is going to prove to be one of the more challenging hurdles. So I'm definitely curious about that.
So the CDC considerations for schools are really broken down in several categories. So the first is about promoting behaviors that reduce the spread of the virus. So it's about education in terms of making sure that everybody understands how important it is to follow those requirements in terms of what if they're sick, staying home, and making sure that they're doing their part to prevent the spread by exercising, appropriate hand hygiene and covering sneezes with their with their elbow and things like that. Also going over the expectation that everyone, including students, will be wearing cloth face masks for summer programming. The guidance talks about ensuring that you have adequate supplies like hand sanitizer, soap, etc., disinfectant, things like that. Making sure that all of your areas are there's appropriate signage hanging in all of your areas to make sure that people clearly understand what the expectations are. The next category of guidance is about maintaining healthy environments, and that is really targeted to cleaning and disinfecting. And the cleaning and disinfecting requirements are really that at a minimum that we would be cleaning all surfaces at the beginning, middle, and end of every day, so at least 3 times a day. That there is more intensive cleaning requirements for transportation vehicles, and that we are more frequently cleaning things like doorknobs and surfaces where people commonly touch. There are concerns about shared objects and discouraging us from having any kind of materials that the kids are sharing, and really working to keep their belongings separate, and making sure that each kid, it would be assigned all of the materials they need so that they don't have to borrow from others. And then there's a lot of things that are more related to the work that our custodial staff will be doing in the buildings, like taking a look at our ventilation systems and making sure that everything's in proper working order, looking at our water systems and making sure that during this time where we've not had a lot of people in the buildings, that our water systems are functioning appropriately, and that we have done any cleaning or preventative work that we need to do on those systems. Some of the things that have been really tricky to interact with are around the classroom layouts, and looking at when you think about the square footage in a classroom. I have the most background knowledge about Berkshire. So most of those classrooms are around 900 square feet. And you need to have 6 feet of physical distance between kids in each of those spaces. So some of those classrooms, you have to consider the materials that you have in the room, the desks, the layout, all of those things. You definitely cannot get the number of kids in those classrooms that you typically would have in those classrooms. So some of the recommendations are pretty specific around the direction that the desks are facing. They're definitely talking about desks and not such tables. They don't want kids necessarily facing one another. They want them to be spaced apart. And they also talk about the same thing for school buses, so that children are seated 1 child per row, skipping rows when possible. They also talk about physical barriers and guards. So a lot of you, if you've been grocery shopping, you've seen the sneeze guards that have shown up in most of the public stores and things like that. So they're asking us to think ahead about reception desks, places where people tend to stand and communicate with someone. They also ask us to think about, meal service. So if we were, we won't be doing meals the way we typically do. But if we were, we would need to have those sneeze guards there on our food service counters as well. Any spaces that are communal spaces, like dining halls and playgrounds, we have to stagger who can be out there. I just said dining halls. I was reading, we don't have dining halls, we have cafeterias, sorry. We have to stagger who's out there because you can't cross the groups of kids, and we have to make sure that they're disinfected in between uses. So there's also work we need to do in terms of the multi-use bathrooms and making sure that we have appropriate barriers in there. The food service, according to the CDC, one of the things they've asked is that they would prefer if people brought their own meals. That's not going to happen in a public school. I think that the meal piece is an important part of what we do. So they're just being specific about disposable food service items like utensils and dishes, and bringing it into classrooms. And then it talks about maintaining healthy operations. That's the next section of the guidance. So it's about making sure that people are not in the building if they are sick or if their family members are sick, and that they understand what all those requirements are. Really limiting only essential people in buildings, so not encouraging extra visitors in the buildings at all. The idea that I think I used the word pod when I was talking earlier, but the CDC refers to it as cohorting, so that, you know, we have to, as much as possible, keep groups together and not mingle them with other groups. And that has to do with the contact tracing elements. We also have to think about the scheduling of how we will have people in the building. So this is a lot of work, and it's a lot of high-level thinking that has to go into this. I think that there's a lot more that I don't think we need to get into around, like, communication and community response efforts and policies around leaves and time off, staffing planning, staff training, making sure everybody recognizes signs and symptoms. And then the final piece is around preparing for when someone does get sick. So the nurses have an entire screening process that they'll have to go through as people enter the building. And we need to make sure that we have a way that we're tracking that information. And we are planning for, if someone gets sick, how can we isolate that someone so that there's not exposure to others in the building. So simple, right?
Lynn, I just wanted to say that I think it's the valiant effort on you and your staff's part to even consider trying to open the doors for the summer. I know that as I look at some of these guidelines, it feels like it's just too much, but you know, if they think that they can make it work. The other thing, Lisa and I were talking earlier today about a different subject, and the sort of trickle down effect of all of these things that are COVID related. It's like, I'm in constant amazement of, so we can't just say we're not going to run a summer program, because that has such an effect on so many families in the community. So I just want to say, you know, thank your staff for even beginning to consider, you know, trying to figure out this undertaking. And then the other thing I was thinking about regarding those CDC guidelines is like, oh, those poor teachers and all that quote unquote flexible seating that they love and the kids love. And now they have to be like, back in 1955, everybody at your little desk pointed in the same direction. So it's tough.
Well, it is going to be a different time. And I mean, that's the piece that's been clear for a while to me, is that we're not going to shift right back into what school historically looks like. Until there's a vaccine, we're going to be in this response phase where we're having to figure out ways that we can meet the needs of our students. And I think we're going to have to be able to be ready to be partially in person, so that we might have some kids in the building, some kids out of the building. This is some of the summer work that'll be connected to the guidance that's coming, is figuring out, is there a staggered schedule we can figure out, or will the guidance include things around kids at a certain age level being remote and kids at another age level being in person? So those are some of the unanswered questions that we really need before we can plan deeply about where we're going to go from here. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of work ahead of us, but you know, we're committed to doing the work because, you know, we're worried about our kids. We would love to have them all back. We know that, you know, the toll that this is taking on the, you know, the mental health needs and the social emotional learning needs of our students and our staff and our communities is huge. And although that's what we would like, that's not the reality. So the focus needs to continue to be on the safety and the well-being of our students and our staff. And that's kind of the angle we'll take in this. So as we're preparing, we'll be preparing to be in that hybrid mode. We'll also be preparing to be in a fully remote mode if that's where we need to be, or we'll also be preparing for how can we, in response to positive cases in our community, how can we be ready to shift quickly from maybe a hybrid in-person model to a reactive school closure. So those are all conversations that leaders are having and teams around the supervisory union are having to plan forward. So I appreciate your comment, Jean Marie, about summer. And I think that, you know, we all want that. We want it very much, but I've been clear from the beginning. If we're moving along and there are pieces that are not coming together, I'm not going to hesitate to pull that plug if I have to, because we have to be able to ensure that we can meet the needs of everybody who's going to be in those buildings. And if we can't, we will have to shift into the remote piece. We're going to talk a little bit about summer meals, and I know Dawn's on this call. She's our food service director, and I just want to give a giant kudos to Dawn Reed. I'm just so thrilled to have her on board. She's done some really amazing work navigating all of the meals that have gone out this year. She's been incredible. So Dawn, do you want to just start by giving kind of a high level summary of where we're heading with summer meals? I think Dawn's on there. There she is.
So I'm here, Lynn. What we're looking at for the summer meals is right now we are delivering meals, busing meals to the homes as of that's going to continue until June 30th, and then once we hit July 1st, that piece of the meal piece of it is going to change, because we're going to have to go into a pickup point only, which will mean parents will have to come to the schools and pick up the meals. They can pick up, you know, just like what we're delivering now. We will transition, rather than doing multiple days at one time, we can transition that, and we can do it so that they can come and pick up one meal or breakfast and lunch for that entire day. I'm still undecided whether that's the best route to go, or if we take and do a couple of days at one time. So those are just pieces that we're still looking at and figuring out. The last week of delivery is a Tuesday on June 30th. So normally a Tuesday delivery would have everything that students would need to get them through until Friday's breakfast. That would be the next meal that they would get delivered, would be Friday. They would get a delivery with Friday's lunch. We are looking at, on that June 30th meal, putting everything out there so that that gets the students through until Friday's lunch will be included in that. So then we would start up pickup on the following Monday morning, which would be July 6th, which is also the day that we're looking at possibly starting the summer programming. So that's my overview of what it looks like. We've put out a lot of meals throughout the SU this month. It's like 33,000 meals that we put out entirely in the SU. That's through all of our communities, so that's a huge number. So staff are really working hard, so I'm hoping that by doing that extra time from the June 30th to the 1st, that can, or to the 6th, that can give kitchen staff kind of a 3 days off and just kind of chill and get themselves back together to start into the summer.
These folks have been working really nonstop since closure. There's been no stopping for breaks or long weekends or anything. They've just really been blasting through. So we're so appreciative for all of our food service staff. They've been really incredible. Any questions on
It
food
is
service?
literally amazing to me that they've been able to pull this off. So thank you so much, Dawn. I know I speak on for all the members of the board. Like, it's just incredible to even try, for me, as trying to keep my family of 4 fed. The idea of 33,000 meals is like so crazy overwhelming. I just, kudos to you all for putting that together. I know we're so thankful, and you know, the idea of continuing this through the summer is like, it's just so honorable. I'm just so proud. So thank you so much.
Any other questions while we have Dawn on the call?
I have a question, if it's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I'm wondering, you had mentioned pickup, and would that mean pickup at one centralized location, or would meals be prepared? Like right now, I know they're being prepared in Enosburg and then kind of filtered out on buses. Would that mean that families would have to go to Enosburg and pick up meals, or would it still be maybe delivered to each of the towns and then picked up in a central location in the town?
So that's a complicated one, and I'm sure glad that Dawn is on this call.
So you're right, Lynn, that is a complicated one. Because Bakersfield and Sheldon do not qualify for area eligible free meals to all, and with it not being a closed site where we know what kiddos are going to be there and be getting those meals, where we could take and see if 51% of those kiddos qualified for the free reduced meals, I think at this point we're kind of looking at they would probably have to go to one of these other sites, which is hard. It stinks for Bakersfield and Sheldon, and I think that's where we're gonna lose a lot of ground. I wish that there was like a place in Enosburg that was really, you know, like on the outskirts of Sheldon that was really close, so that Sheldon families could get in there and get the meal, and same thing with Bakersfield, but I haven't really found one that would work. And in the way that the federal government, the way the USDA and the state are looking at it is, you know, they're saying if it's not an area eligible, you can't satellite the meals in and have people come there and pick them up. We're still asking those questions to see if something changes. And if something changes, then we definitely would transition into having a spot where those family members could come and pick those meals up. And that's why I'm kind of wondering if maybe we want to, rather than do one breakfast, one lunch each day, if maybe we want to do like 2 breakfasts, 2 lunch each day. That way the parents in these outlying community, you know, out in Bakersfield and Sheldon, maybe they could come in. What I'm kind of looking at doing for the meals is maybe trying to open it up so that the pickup in the morning is rather early. That way, if parents are maybe going through one of those areas or something, that maybe they could pick up the meals and bring the meals with their kids to the local daycare that they go to or something like that. But though, I mean, if you guys have some suggestions of things that you think would work and whatnot, you know, shoot them my way, and I can always go to the state and say, hey, this is a thought, can we work with this? And so
one thing I want to say
too
about
bad.
Dawn, you've been a really creative thinker about all of this, because I know it was important to us when we shifted into COVID-19 phase that we're in. We could bring 6 of our communities, and because Bakersfield and Sheldon, I just went on, my internet went unstable. Can you still hear me? So because Bakersfield and Sheldon did not meet that poverty criteria, Dawn found a creative way to be able to use a site somewhere else and then deliver into those communities in order to still be able to do it. So I know that this is Dawn's priority, is to make this equitable possible. So if there's a way around kind of all those regulations in USDA, I'm confident Dawn will find it. And we will continue to keep advocating to be able to have greater flexibility with these things. But in the meantime, it sounds like where we are now, that's the best that we can do, is to make sure that all Sheldon and Bakersfield families understand that they can access in any of the other communities who are serving those meals.
So I have a comment and a question for Dawn. Dawn, thank you very much for putting all together that you've put together. Is there a way that you can ask if there are volunteers from those 2 communities who could possibly pick up meals for X number of families and bring them back and then distribute them to those particular families. That's I guess my comment, although that's more of a question. I guess I have two questions. And the other is when is summer feeding scheduled to end? Will it go right up through to the first week of school or not?
So those are good thoughts. We can possibly, that's kind of just something that we've been toying around with, an idea of being creative and trying to figure out, is there a way that we can somehow get meals delivered? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep all schools in the SU the same, because we are the same. I mean, we're all the same SU and everything. So I think that if we try to take and come up with some volunteers to deliver some of those meals into some of those families in Bakersfield and Sheldon, it's also something that maybe we'll look at in the other communities as well, because I think there are communities and there are parents in all of our communities that have issues where it comes around with transportation and whatnot. So it definitely is something that we can think about and that we can try to work on. And then as far as the summer meals goes, I haven't really thought a whole lot into when we're going to stop summer meals. Basically, what I'm telling people is it's probably going to continue going on until we get into August, partway into August. It could possibly go right up until the first day of school starts, but we have to look at it and we have to make sure that whatever we're thrown at for CDC guidelines and whatnot, that we give ourselves in our kitchens enough time and the staff enough time to get that stuff done. And so until we find out more guidance on what's going to happen with the start of the school year, as of right now, I'm saying we're definitely running summer meals until August 1st, probably going in further into August.
Okay, that's good to know, because back in the day when the Richford Day Camp operated for 6 weeks, when those 6 weeks ended, there were many families who went without until the day that school started. And my concern really is for families like that. And back to the volunteers delivering food, I guess my thought was if someone picked up at, say, Enosburg and then drove to the Bakersfield line, and families met them there and picked up their food, that would at least help them a little bit. Someone mentioned, you mentioned trying to find a site that was on the Enosburg-Sheldon border. So even if there could be a delivery to that type of a location, you wouldn't necessarily be preparing the meals at that site, but it still would be distributed at the town line. So just some thoughts for you to keep in the back of your mind. I know you're so busy with this, but it would be great to see all the families served and served equally.
I think that there's some things you'll have to work out with the USDA on that, Dawn. If I remember right, that kind of butts up against what we were trying to do at the beginning of this, when this happened. I know you have some strict guidance on the summer. I'm going to get confused now because there's it feels like there are multiple programs that we're working with, and in your summer feed model, it needs to be specific to the kids 0 to 18. And Dawn, can you talk a little bit about congregate site versus how you'll be serving? Because you had to get, I think, a waiver to be able to do that, correct?
Yes, so we have a waiver that is, we've been issued the waiver until I believe it's August 31st, so that we do not have to have congregate sites, meaning the kids do not need to come to the site, get that meal, and consume that meal at that site. That's why we're able to do that delivery piece right now, and why we're able to do the pickup piece where parents would come to the site pick up the meals for the kids and bring them home, and they could eat them at home. So that's what that waiver is for.
Did the waiver give you, I guess where I was going with that, there was a requirement that we had talked about a long time ago about you having to see the child. You know what I'm talking about? Like, what Lisa's saying, I think what she originally said was, if there were people, not the last thing you said, Lisa, but what I thought I heard earlier, if there was a family
So I'm going
that
to stop you right there, Lynn. The one where we had to actually physically see the child was the fresh fruit and veggie program. If we wanted to continue the fresh fruit and veggie, we had to physically see the child.
Okay. So can you see why I'm so super glad that we have an FNASU food service director this year? Complicated, but thank you, Dawn. Any other questions?
You're welcome.
I don't have a question about food, but I wanted to, if it's okay, go back and talk about summer.
Sure. Can we let Dawn jump off this call? Thank you, Dawn. You're welcome to stay if you want to, but I bet you have other things that you're okay with shifting to.
Yes, I am. Thank you. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me.
Okay, Erin.
Okay. So I was reading the survey this morning or this afternoon about the summer program, and noticed that Enosburg would be taking Bakersfield and Sheldon students because that's how it's happened the past couple of years, and Sheldon because of the building project makes complete sense. What brings up a little bit of concern, and what I have a question about, is if you have to limit the number of students coming to the site because of health reasons, I'm wondering how that decision is going to be made about who gets to go and who doesn't.
So that has been a part of the conversation, and I think that the thing in Enosburg, we would still have a good amount of access for Bakersfield and Sheldon. In terms of the number of kids who have participated in the past in Bakersfield, there's not a worry that we would be necessarily having to turn them away. If all of a sudden there are 30 kids, that might be different. But they have more space spread out too in Enosburg, Erin. So they have that ability to use both of those schools. And they could spread, if they needed to, into the middle or the high school. I don't feel like I'm equipped right now to talk in too much detail about how they have planned to organize and decide upon those numbers. That'd be something I'd have to defer to Heather Moore on. To be honest with you, for some of the feedback that I've got within the community is that I think some people will be happy to see the summer program, and I think others maybe won't, because I think some of the restrictions that we'll have to be following, I think there are some people that just would rather not have to have their kids participate and wear masks this summer, and be reminded to follow the physical distancing and things like that. Right. So one of the things I didn't say was that we've reduced the time period for those programs too. So instead of it being like a 8 o'clock until 5 o'clock program, it's going to be I think 8 until 1, and it's going to be pretty strict in terms of a drop-off window, and if you're beyond that window, we are not going to be able to accept more kids because of those screening requirements. So the drop-off and pickup windows will be pretty strict this summer.
And I know that, like, I get it. There's so many things that you guys are doing and needing to work on. You know that I get it. It concerns me. We're going to lose a lot of families anyway with that lack of transportation, and the families that we are going to lose are the ones who need it the most. It just makes me think, like, we have a building in Bakersfield that is,
you will have kids in Bakersfield, though. You are running a child care program in Bakersfield. So that's what's made this also complicated, Erin, because we can't cross those kids. So you are our only licensed child care site in the SU. So Bakersfield will be running a smaller than normal, but they will be running a child care site this summer.
Funded differently which is a whole nother topic.
Yeah. So I've covered most of what I wanted to talk about in terms of COVID, except the last piece, and that's the piece that's on a lot of people's minds around the financial implications associated with COVID-19. And I'm going to ask Morgan to help out with this part. We've already talked to you quite a lot about the implications that we are facing this year in FY20 and the implications that we're anticipating in FY21. I know that Morgan was able to get some information today, and I feel like he's a little more equipped to talk about what he learned today. So I'm going to have him lead this part of the discussion.
Thanks. I'll start with this year, and then we can really blow through my section when we get to it. What we're finding is that we're spending money differently this year than we would have without COVID, but it looks like overall we are spending less than we normally would have. And some of the obvious places to look are things like substitute teachers and the professional development that was planned, and the supplies that go with an occupied building. And so in terms of where we're going to end this year, you've got the report that I sent out today or yesterday. I haven't updated the my anticipated year-end figures, but when I go through it, every category that I would change with any significance would be down. The only concern I have on the NMV side for this year is that we have still not received the small schools grant / merger support grant tied to Bakersfield that was sort of added in statute at the end of the last session. And I've been asking the agency about that, I'm guessing for about 6 weeks now, and haven't been able to get an answer. But in terms of expenses, we're going to be below where we were budgeted, and that's going to help for FY22. For FY21, this is the budget that you passed in March. Today, the House passed the yield bill, and the yield is the one of the four numbers that sets your tax rate, and it's the one that the legislature controls. The House version had $10,988, which is $105 higher than the budgets that you warned and that Enosburg-Richford warned. What that means is that the tax rate would be about a penny, maybe a little bit over a penny lower than the rates that you warned in March. So that's definitely good news to our residents. The other piece of the bill, and Lisa may be able to help me out a little bit with this, is they're acknowledging in it that the Ed Fund is going to have a huge deficit in FY21, and they have sort of changed the rules on how to deal with that to give them much more flexibility. They can have a deficit in the Ed Fund in FY21. They seem to be anticipating borrowing at the state level to cover some of that, obviously using whatever federal money that they can use to help offset that. But they seem to be putting in place the levers to keep the deficit from impacting budgets all at once. Lisa, I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
Probably not much more than that. You've got a good handle on it, Morgan. That there's definitely overwhelming support to not put the COVID-19 crisis on the backs of property taxpayers. So whatever can be done is attempting to be done. One of the big questions out there is what the federal money can be used for and how we can use it at the state level for education funding. So that remains to be seen. So I just want to be really clear that we're doing the right thing as this board. We talked about at our last meeting, being very cautious about how we're spending any money at all that might be discretionary. And I think we're doing a really good job, and I've kind of defended us to the legislature because, you know, there's always that talk about, oh, school boards and spend, but we don't. We're very fiscally conservative here, and I'm very proud of that and pleased to be part of a board that thinks like that. So I've done a lot of talking about how really how little we can trim from our budgets, but we're still doing it. So thank you for your guidance on that, and we'll just keep working at it. But next year could look very, very different for us.
Yeah, so at this point, unless the Senate changes that bill dramatically, I think in terms of our tax rates for FY21, we are going to be in a pretty good place. Obviously, we don't know how we're educating kids next year and if we've budgeted appropriately. And you may see spending next year being pretty different from what we thought it was going to be 6 months ago when we warned the budget. And I can see that there are some costs that potentially could go up dramatically and some that may go down dramatically. And we'll just need to wait and see what the guidance brings and what the end of August brings in terms of how we're educating kids. The advantage of ending this year under budget is that fund balance amount is the amount that we use for the FY22 budgets, which is what we will be starting on in October as a board. That is sort of the next worry point for me in terms of tax rates and just the district finances. The legislature has said that they're going to deal with the deficit in FY21, or that's the proposal. But we do know that the impact from the COVID crisis is really more like a 5-year problem, or even maybe a 10-year problem, as it's going to take a while for tourism to bounce back. We can anticipate people having trouble paying their property tax, and all the funds that support education are all anticipated to be taking some hits. So when we are going to our voters for an FY22 budget, the governor or the tax commissioner may be putting out a much smaller yield amount initially, and that may give people sticker shock for their FY22 budgets. And this is going to be at a time where unemployment will still be probably relatively high. So I think it's going to be a tough budget year for FY22. Bringing that balance in from FY20 is going to help significantly. It will help us to buy down the tax rate, which we may need to do even if we are level funding budgets.
Hey, Morgan, quick question. I know that you and Lynn talked a little bit at the last meeting about this potential issue with the way the busing and the busing costs, because we haven't technically been busing children, we've been busing meals this last 3 months, and what that financial hit might look like. And I don't know if there's been any clarification or resolution around that, and if any of the surplus that you're seeing from some of the savings that we have realized in this stretch may be able to be applied to some of these potential busing costs. And looking further into the fall, if guidance turns out that we have to double the number of bus routes because we can't carry as many children per bus load, where's that extra money going to come from? I don't know if there's even an answer for that yet.
Sure, all great questions, and Lynn can jump in on this, and this isn't something that we necessarily see the same way. In terms of the reimbursement based on transportation expenses this year, I have asked that question specifically of the AOE, and I've not heard a response yet. I am at the point, this would impact us for FY22, and it would impact the SU budget because transportation has to be spent at the SU. So this board is a little bit removed from it. My understanding is that the legislature or statute allocates a certain amount of money for transportation reimbursement, and then that's spread around the districts based on their actual expenses. So my gut tells me that since we are all in the same boat and we all stopped transporting kids in March, that the share of money is not going to change between one district to the next. It's still the same pot of money and it's still getting divided out, but instead of getting divided out over 9 months of busing, it'll get divided out over 6 months of busing. I've put that to the AOE as my understanding, and I have not heard back from that yet. I think your question about the CDC guidelines and what busing looks like for next year is much more significant because we have budgeted for the 20 bus routes or whatever we normally have. And if that has to go up to 40 or 60, that's an expense we haven't budgeted for. On top of that, we know that that there aren't that many additional bus drivers out there, and there aren't that many buses in Vermont right now out there. So I think if those restrictions hold, my gut tells me that we're going to be looking for an answer other than more bus routes. And Lynn, I don't know if you want to say something different on that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we have a collection of really great questions that we're all waiting to have enough guidance and a clear enough picture to be able to answer. And both of these questions, Mary, kind of fall in that bucket. I think that you all know that most of the time Morgan and I are tuned in and kind of agreeing on, you know, the things we should and shouldn't worry about. And this is one I think that I probably have worried more than Morgan would like me to worry about in terms of the state transportation aid. So we know that this state aid comes as a 2-year kind of rolling average. So the worry is that the statute clearly says students, and that's something that, you know, I've heard in multiple places, that the aid is based on transporting students. So I know Morgan is right that we're all in that same boat and they're going to have to address it. But in terms of the aid, there is that wonder about how this will impact us over the next 2-year period if that does get adjusted. In terms of the budget for next year in transportation, there are so many questions that have to be answered in terms of what model will be allowed to shift to. What is that guidance going to look like? Is it going to be about, you know, thinking about a school in terms of shifts? Will it be thinking about school in terms of a certain population of students by age group or some other way? And until we can unpack that, we can't really calculate out how many buses that would require. Morgan's absolutely right. They're not physically 60 or 80 buses and bus drivers out there. So if we were able to have that many kids in person and we were still having to provide the transportation for all of those students, we would have to be looking at a very staggered start and end time for both kids and for faculty. That's kind of the best answer that I can give right now. But this is some really forward thinking without having enough guidance to give a good, thoughtful answer yet. But no, we are thinking about it, Mary.
And even that solution would cost money because we're now, although we're not adding another driver or a bus, we're tripling the miles that they're putting on the bus.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that.
So I don't have anything else under COVID. So I'm ready to move on unless anybody has any other questions.
Lynn, I do have one final question. I mean, I have a million questions, but I do have one more pressing one on my mind. Looking ahead to the fall, I mean, we still have time, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more guidance, and it sounds like it changes by the week. but in a regular year, I see often kids coming to school with runny noses and colds and such. And I'm just curious, like what is it going to look like to be stricter about when kids can safely enter the building? And when I don't know, it's like a cold, it's like the new Salem witch trials. Like, I don't know how we're equipped to really delineate, is it allergies? Is it a cold? Is it COVID? And what does that look like? And who can enter the building? And if you have any runny nose, are you just not? And sometimes parents are in a real pinch. Their kid might have a tiny cold and they drop them at school because they need to go to work. And so it's just been on my mind. How are we going to monitor that? I assume our health staff will be an important part of that.
I would say that, again, you guys are hitting me with all really great questions. Our FNESU nurses have been meeting really regularly, and they're also connected to regional and state level nursing groups who are working on figuring out exactly these things, because one of the things that we don't want to be in a situation of doing is, making it so that a child who suffers from allergies for the entire month of September can't come to school at all because it could possibly be COVID. I know that they're coming up with the checklist of, here are the questions that we're going to ask, and here's the temperature check that we're going to do. And I'm confident that they're going to come up with something that's reasonable. And when I say reasonable, it might not feel reasonable to everyone, because not everyone's going to like the answer that they come up with, but it's going to be reasonable in assuring the health and safety of the people who are in the building. I don't 100% know what it'll look like yet, Mary, about how we can weed that out. I mean, it might have to do with, if there are kids that are struggling with allergies, or they have a cold that they're seen by a doctor, or, we have some documentation that this is allergy related. I can relate to this because for those of you that have known me forever, I have a cough. Like, I have a cough that I have all the time. And I feel like every time now that I cough, I have to mute myself. I don't want people thinking I'm sick. I'm really not sick. It's just the cough that I have. But we're living in that world where, it feels strange. Like, people are going to look at you if you cough or sneeze in public. And unfortunately, that's kind of our new reality that we are in. So we are working on it, Mary, and I know.
And do you know yet, Lynn, if one positive case in a particular school community would prompt closure for the entire school?
I know that we have to prepare for reactive closures, but they have not given us the guidance on what that would be, whether that's a closure of a classroom or a closure of an entire school. If it's a 2-week closure, is it a couple day closure? Will they go in and disinfect? Like, that's guidance that I'm anticipating is going to be coming, but I can't yet understand or imagine what that's going to be. That's a little ahead of where my thinking is right now.
I will stop asking questions
No,
if there are no answers.
We do this every day, and I know there are some days Morgan wished I didn't have his cell phone number because he might get sick of me texting. We also have to think about this text to him. So it is a lot to think about, for sure.
Thanks, Lynn.
You're welcome. So I'd like to shift into personnel, and I have in Bakersfield, I'll start with resignations. I have 2 staff members who resigned just after your May board meeting. So that is Mallory Jones, 4th grade teacher, and Victoria Rosales, your music teacher. So I'll ask the board to make a motion to accept those resignations.
I'll make that motion to accept those 2 reservations from Bakersfield.
I'm kind of so sad about this that I don't want to, I didn't want to make the motion. Thank you, Mary. And we'll vote by roll. Emily,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Kat.
Yes.
Thank you.
So there are no additional resignations in either of the other 3 buildings. I think we captured them all in our May meeting. Principals, feel free if I'm not 100% right to stop me. I know that has happened before, and I'm sure it'll happen again. So stop me if I've got something wrong. I'm going to shift into hiring now, and I'm going to give this all to you. I'll give it to you as all of the schools together, and you can make one motion for hiring. So in Bakersfield, they are hiring Ella Church and Alexis Trombley to fill elementary positions. Montgomery and Berkshire are done their hiring. Sheldon will be hiring Bailey, I don't know how to say this one, Christy, DeForge.
Yes.
And Bridget Ettinger Kernan. Both will be filling elementary, 1-year elementary positions. You have a couple of staff members in Sheldon that are taking that year's leave of absence. So you have 2 from Bakersfield and 2 from Sheldon. So be looking for a motion to hire.
I can
I'll
make the
make
motion.
Sorry. Was that you, Erin?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I just had a question. Does that fill most or all of our open positions?
It does. That's the next part of my agenda, and I think
Okay.
that you are mostly filled, but I'll let the principals help me fill in the holes.
Oh,
there.
yes, I see that now. Sorry, I was
Okay.
preempting you.
No worries.
Okay, so let's vote by roll if we're okay with that. Emily,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Kat.
Yes.
Great, thank you all.
Erin says yes too.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so sorry, and I have it written down. I'll ask you twice next time.
So
Okay,
for
thank you.
remaining open positions, I think I'm close, but I principals, I'm quite certain I've missed a position or 2. In Bakersfield, I believe Rhoda is still looking for music, and I don't think you're looking for intervention at this point. Is that correct?
We have a part-time math interventionist, sorry, 0.5 that's still out there, but we haven't had any applicants, so.
Okay. So
may
are
not
there
be
any
coming
other
yet.
openings for you in Bakersfield, Rhoda?
Just the music.
Okay. Berkshire, I believe Lenny's only is a 0.5 LPN.
Yep.
Halftime.
Correct.
Montgomery, I believe, is fully staffed. And I believe that Sheldon is still looking for tech integrationist. Do you have any other openings, Christy?
Just a school psychologist, but that's the SU.
And we may have news for you on that one. So we'll be back in touch. So I just want to say kudos to these principals. Hiring season is challenging enough, but to tackle a hiring season in the middle of a global pandemic is pretty darn challenging. And I'm proud of you all. Like, we're in just the beginning of June, and to have that few openings still, I'm pleased with the work that you've done. I think it's great that you've been so on top of it and you've been getting some good people hired. Appreciate that. And I have nothing under student, but I have 2 things under other. Because there are more open positions remaining, we don't always meet in July. I suspect I'm probably going to be sending you a message at some point and saying, hey, I think we should meet, just because the world is a little crazy right now. I would like you to make a motion. You did this last summer, to authorize me to be able to hire and fill the remaining positions in between our board meetings.
Lynn, I'll make that motion to authorize you to hire away from the table.
Thank you, Mary. Emily,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
Erin,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Kat.
Yes.
Great, thank you all.
The last thing I have for you is something I'm sending to Morgan right now. At your last meeting, when we began the conversation about the elementary school choice, I sent you the inter-district elementary school transfer procedures for those strange geographic issues that we have around the supervisory union and have been a little stuck in where to go next from here. So I want to just put it up. I'd like to have Morgan share it if he could, so that we could take a look at it. You asked me to get some information back from Pietro, which we did. We reached out to Pietro and feel like we have an okay sense at this point. So I just need a sense from the board about how you're feeling about moving forward with this kind of policy. So do you all remember the conversation we were having and what this is in connected to? Apologize, Jean Marie, I know you're watching from a phone. So this is really about capturing those kiddos who live essentially in one community, but geographically it is another community, and they have to drive by that community, a different community, to get to their resident school. So this procedure was intended to take care of that. You asked me last time, this is how I think I remembered it, was to attend to making sure that it was really clear around transportation, that it wouldn't be provided, and to make it really clear that there would be reasons why kids would not be accepted if there was not room, or if it had a negative impact on the sending or the receiving school, which I did. Morgan and I reached out for some clarification. We had conversations about where does the money go? And so where we've kind of landed is we weren't wrong in our thinking. If there is a child who is an Enosburg resident and they're being educated in Montgomery, as an example, because they live essentially in Montgomery, Enosburg would count the child in their ADM. This is all exactly the same as it is for our kids who exercise the more broad public school choice for high school kiddos. So the resident community would count the child in their ADM. And then the agreement that we have for those kids who come to Enosburg, for example, or to Richford from a town outside of the Enosburg-Richford district, like Missisquoi, for example, is we would bill back any extraordinary costs. So if the child had an IEP and there were extraordinary costs associated with that child attending the school, those costs would go back to their school of residence to be paid. And that's something that I think that we have clarified at this point that we can do, is we can set up that same agreement between all of the schools in FNESU to handle it the way we would handle it in a high school choice situation. Were there other questions that you had that I haven't answered?
So Lynn, just to clarify that financial component, you're saying that there would be a bill back to the town of residence for extraordinary costs, but I'm assuming that's above and beyond the kind of average per pupil cost.
Yeah.
That would be borne by the receiving district, regardless of the fact that that particular taxpayer does not pay taxes to a town in the NMVU district.
So this would be the agreement that we would propose between the two districts in Franklin Northeast. we would propose that you handle this the way we handle high school choice students, so that you agree in advance between the two different district boards that if there is a child that has associated costs above and beyond what typical tuition would bring or a typical general ed student would cost, that those get billed back to the school of residence, to the community of residence, I should say. Morgan, what have I missed? I have to say, we just had this conversation a month ago, but in the time of COVID, it's kind of feeling like that was 6 months ago that we had this conversation.
Yeah, I don't think that you missed anything. So the town where the child is resident still gets the benefit of counting them in their ADM. But there's some protection for the school where the child would be going, and that if they have to hire a one-on-one para for this kiddo, that cost would be billed back to the sending town. But Mary, I think what you were going at is just sort of the regular ed cost and the share of the classroom teacher, and yeah, that would still live with the district that has the school where the kid's attending.
Right, and that's where it does diverge significantly from how we high school tuition, because we send our high school tuition dollars, even for just for a general ed cost, the per pupil, we send that to the actual school that is tasked with educating and taking care of that child.
Right, and this is the high school choice that this is modeled on is the one that would allow a kid from who lives in St. Albans and should go to Maple Run, would allow that kid to go to Enosburg. So it's a different law than the law that governs the K-8 schools.
Yep. And Morgan, from the financial perspective, then for from the general ed costs, the per pupil costs for a student, how impactful or not is that for the receiving district that doesn't receiving the child, that is where the tax dollars are not actually supporting that child in being taught at a particular school? I mean, I suppose it's kind of the costs get diluted over, the teacher's already there, the classroom materials are already there, the administrative staff is already there, and so it's how
I would say that
is it?
In most cases, it's going to be negligible because of that, and that's why you have the reference to class size in that policy, so that you don't ever get to a point where taking this kid on is going to put you in a place where you need to hire another teacher, hire another support staff member. The special ed costs, I think anything extraordinary you get to bill back, so that also wouldn't be impactful. I could come up with a really bizarre case where you had a kid that had super high costs and was not special ed eligible, and that falls into a gray area. But that's a case that we've never seen here, so it's nothing that we've had to deal with. And then the benefit in theory is that at some point as an SU, we're gonna probably save a little bit in transportation and not trying to truck Kate Muir's kid past your house to get them to Richford Elementary School.
And Lynn, would you anticipate this being something that is reevaluated on a year-by-year basis? Because that could be disruptive to the child, or is it, once they are in, they're in, as long as they would like to continue going to the school closest to them? Is it a kind of in perpetuity for their K-8 career?
We would not want to put a procedure in place that would do harm to kids, and having them have to reapply to this and worry about whether or not they'd be able to maintain, in the school that they're in. I think that would be damaging. So I certainly wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend that once they're in, and that they're able to complete until they matriculate to whatever high school that they're going to go to.
Okay, thanks.
Do people still need Morgan to be sharing at this point?
Lynn, at what stage is this kind of procedure? Like, we're just kind of reviewing it now. And
So
will it...
we're kind of in a stage where I had a difficult time reading the will of this board at your last meeting, to be completely honest. And I know that this was a situation where it didn't get into the policy packet, so I completely understood that you were seeing it quickly and not having time to digest it. If it was something that I got a sense in June that both boards were on board with, this would be a reason for me to call you back and ask you to approve in July this procedure for both the districts and for the SU. We don't technically have to do that because it's a procedure and not a policy, but I would never put a change like this in place without having it go through the approval process of the board, because it's so different than what we have done.
Right, and I think it has, financial implications that are important to be considered.
Absolutely.
Do you see anybody jumping on board this year with this policy? Like, do we have families who are hoping this happens quickly?
Yes.
Oh, I see, Sandy. Okay.
I think that's the one we know of, but I think that there are, when Morgan said something about the transportation costs, there probably in every one of the communities, there is a unique situation like this. So, there's no way to really predict how many people would want to or who would not want to benefit from this. But I would have to think that over time, the benefit that could be shared within each of the separate districts would kind of even it out, because it really is, we have some strange geography that we deal with within these communities. I mean, strange in a bad way, just strange in terms of, dividing community lines, I guess.
It seems like we're protected in the sense of, if the numbers are too high, you can say, no, we can't do that right now. But then it also opens up possibilities for families. It doesn't, for me, it seems like this is a positive move.
I just had a quick question. I noticed at the end of the procedure, it's mentioned for a denial, we list extenuating circumstances, and that's pretty wide open. So if there's ever anything unusual, is that something that comes up with the board that we discuss?
So people can always they can always appeal a decision that I make, John. So if I make a decision and I say it's for this extenuating circumstance, the family would have the ability to appeal beyond me to the board.
Okay. And is that something typical to put into a procedure like this as a catch-all for something we haven't thought of that may happen?
So this kind of, I put that language in there and I don't love it, to be completely honest with you, John, but Mary asked a question earlier about the first policy. And that's the question that, when we're making the changes like this, that always kind of goes through my head about what are the things that we haven't anticipated could be, unintended consequences for moving in this direction or in that direction. And I think that I just want to make sure that if we shift to a policy like this, that there is a way for us to be able to look at each of those situations individually and the impact that it would have on both the sending and the receiving school. And I don't know that I could articulate all of those potential impacts at this point, because I can't yet envision what they might be. So I could see this being a policy or a procedure that we would bring back for evaluation, just like we talked about at the beginning, like the other policy, the elementary school choice transfer policy.
And Lynn, just to kind of segue off of that, then, are you, as far as the numbers, because in the in the inter-district policy now for NMVU, you have those number parameters of kids because we're trying to be mindful of capacity. And that policy, it can vary from year to year. I mean, people have to apply by that certain cutoff and commit to the entire year. But do you foresee it being kind of tricky then to kind of keep, the 10 student limit of the first policy? How does that kind of affect this policy? Because then we may be getting into numbers higher than these thresholds that you've established are kind of make the most sense.
I'm not sensing that this is going to be something that we're going to have an overflow of kids and families wanting to jump onto for the fall. I think the reality is, once a child and a family begin in a school, most of the time they want to continue in that school. So I'm not looking at this as something where, if a child is established in one of our schools and they're in the 5th grade, that they're all of a sudden going to want to pull out and go to the school that falls into their, closer to where they're residing. So I think this is going to be more about capturing the kids that are coming up, like the example that we have in Montgomery right now. So I am not predicting that I think we're going to have a lot of kids that fall under this policy, but I think it allows us some leeway to be able to make decisions that make sense for kids and families as they're coming up through. So could it be more than that? I mean, it definitely, I have been surprised before, and I guess it's possible that it could be more. I had not put a number in here purposefully because I didn't, it almost is counter to what we're trying to get at. Like if we say that we have, only 5 can do it, if the intention is to, make it make more sense about where kids are attending school. And we've been really specific. This isn't just that you're a mile or 2 closer to another school. We've been really specific that you've got to drive through the different town to get to your school of residence. I don't know how to pick a number and have it match up with what we're trying to get at here.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I can appreciate that it's tricky. And, and Morgan just said, none of these kind of numbers will, when we were talking about kind of the finances of it, make it so that we would be compelled to hire more staff.
Right.
But I think with the combined policy, if both policies were in place and we had unanticipated kind of numbers moving, I think that's where on this second policy or procedure, I get more concerned in the inter-district policy if we don't have tax dollars that follow the child, but stay in the town of residence and not the town where they're going to school. But we start getting into territory where we have to hire more staff because of these policies and procedures. I think that's where I start to feel concerned then that we don't have tax dollars following the child.
And you have protective language in there, Mary, about that exactly, though, is that if there isn't space and it would require, if it doesn't fit, we had talked about that class size policy. So we have that minimum and maximum in our class size policy, and we also have that optimal range. So that would be kind of the metrics for deciding whether or not there's space, is if that class that they were going into fell into the optimal range. So there would still be quite a bit of room beyond that child before we'd have to start talking about there are too many kiddos in here for this one teacher. So I completely hear what you're saying. I think I completely hear what you're saying. But I think that we wouldn't be making those decisions to allow entrance if we were getting too close to that line.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it sounds like you could stay attuned to that class size and those numbers so that we're not getting, beyond the capacity of one class and getting into hiring I mean, and there's some buildings, I mean, I'm most familiar with Montgomery. There isn't another physical classroom space to add a second, third grade class or another fourth grade class, and so on and so forth. So
most of the buildings are in that very same situation in terms of not having the luxury of those additional spaces.
Yeah.
Morgan, would you mind not sharing your screen unless anybody still wants to take a look at this? I have principals on this call, and I just kind of wanted to see their faces because I'm going to say something that I think that I know what their faces are going to look like. When I go to them and say, hey, we have an application for a child for this interdistrict policy, they are going to hold me accountable for the class sizes that they have. They're going to make sure that I'm going to make sure they're going to make sure that we're all being open and honest with us about whether or not there is actually space for those kids. So these will be decisions that will be, they'll be collaborative decisions, and they'll be well thought out and careful decisions. So I see Sandy's little smile. I know she's all of them really. I'm confident they'll hold me accountable, Mary.
Lynn, can you forward us a copy of that interdistrict procedure at some point?
I'll do it right now.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I think that is all I have. Actually, before I say that's all I have, are you, I couldn't see all of your faces. Are you okay with me continuing to move forward with this process, checking back in with the other board, and then circling back around to this in July if it's something that I'm getting a sense that everybody is on board with?
I think so. I think this is something that we had talked about when, before we merged. So I don't want to slow it down, but I really do want to, I can't read it on my tiny little phone. So if you could send it out to all of us so that we can, continue to give you feedback, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we're at the principals. I feel like we kind of keep going in circles a little bit tonight. Questions for the principals? I appreciate you sending your reports, and I'm thankful that we all got to hear a little bit about your end of the year celebrations. Did anybody have questions for any of the principals, or did they have anything additional they wanted to add to the comment about this evening?
Excuse me, this is Ann Larrabee. Can I just say something quickly?
Sure.
I just wanted to say thank you for being so welcoming when I've been in these meetings. It's been really helpful for me to hear what's going on at this level too. And I wanted to thank you all for all of your hard work during these challenging times. And my principal, Lenny, has shown great leadership, and I really appreciate all that you've done, Lenny. And when we have questions, if he doesn't know the answers, he tells us he doesn't know the answers, and I appreciate that. And Lynn, as always, your leadership is impeccable, and I appreciate you and admire you and love you, and you're doing a great job. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Ann.
There was a quick thing in my report that talked about retiring teachers. And I don't want to take a whole lot of time around that, but because I realize it's getting late. But I know that we have a retiring teacher from our school, as you know, who's been in our district, in this district for a long time, Arlene O'Rourke. And there was a tradition that Bakersfield gave a gift to the retiring teacher. And it was brought to my attention this year. Well, what are we doing about that? Because it's a whole new board. So I'm just putting it out there.
Thank you for bringing that up, Rhoda. I know that Erin and I had a little bit of a conversation around that outside of the board. And I know that several years ago, I was able to attend a 8th grade graduation at Sheldon Elementary. And I know that they have a tradition in their building as well, how they honor their retiring teachers. So as I've sort of been thinking about this, it seems like we are one big board now, but I think it behooves us to continue to honor some of those building traditions that we've had. And so, as much as possible, that's the smoke detector going off here. I'd like for us to try to continue to honor those traditions as the individual communities that we are. So I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that, or Erin, if you wanted to comment.
Yeah, so when Rhoda asked me about this, I had wondered what the teachers would think. Like, do they want it to be uniform so that it's equal, or do you continue to honor traditions at each school? I love the fact that we are a unified district, but yet each school has their own personalities. I think that we can be equitable without being the same. So I think, I just wonder if maybe, since we have a July meeting on the books now, that we put this under board business in July for coming years. I just think it's a little late to the ball game for this year. But yeah, I had wondered if something equitable, but doesn't have to necessarily be the same thing. Those are my thoughts.
I think typically it's not, and maybe I don't know exactly about some of our communities, but I think typically it's taken care of at the school level. And, I know what some of your traditions are, but not all of your traditions. And I know you each have a little bit of funding that you can use to help with that. A lot of you have like sunshine funds and things like that to help with your end of year expenses and recognizing and honoring your retiring staff members. So I would encourage you to maintain those. I mean, all through this process, I agree with Jean Marie, we've talked about, being united and working well together, but at the same time, honoring and respecting the differences that we all have. And I think that it's important to continue to do that. We don't have to throw away tradition just because we're a unified board. So was there something specific, Rhoda, that you were feeling like that the board needed to act on?
No, it just came to my attention that the former Bakersfield board would give a gift, and it was asked of me by my teachers, is the board now going to do that? And
Does it come down to funding? Like, I think the funding came from the board budget.
Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know how to answer.
Yeah.
So could you give I'm sure Morgan can help you with that answer if you give him a call or check in with him tomorrow in terms of funding that. I don't think that the board is telling you not to do the same thing that you've done. That's the sense I'm getting.
That's yeah.
Okay, any other comments or questions for or from our principals? Okay, Morgan, I feel like it's your turn, but I almost feel like we got to hear a lot of your comments already, but please go ahead.
So yeah, there's only one thing left on my agenda and then one quick other. I just wanted to give you a quick update on the Sheldon construction project, and Christy can chime in as well, as she actually gets to see what's going on there. Overall, I would say that obviously we are ahead of schedule, since we weren't really going to start breaking ground until 2 weeks from now. So that's one benefit. It seems like Spates is pretty close to fully staffed and moving pretty quickly through the building. And then I guess just overall, in terms of the bad news that we always expect to find when we start digging into old walls and old floors, So far, knock on wood, there really hasn't been any major bad findings in what we've unearthed in Sheldon. Some a little bit of rot here and there, but nothing surprising. And it looks like the gym floor, which has a big crack running through it, it looks like the surface of that is a lot better than we had all expected. Seeing a nod from Christy. So, and then the only other I have, it doesn't require board action, but we just wanted to give you guys a heads up as an exception to the let's not spend any money that is at all discretionary. We have grant money to pay for half of the E911 upgrade in Berkshire and in Sheldon. And it requires a 50% match, but we are going to move forward with that primarily because we think the grants are going to go away. And while right now there's a law that we need to be compliant, but there's no stick backing it up, we think at some point there would be a penalty if we're not 911 compliant in all our schools. And unless you've got any questions on the parts that I had at the meeting beforehand, that's all I got.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think this brings us to board business. Erin, I know that you've asked for the retirement gifts to be put on board business for our next meeting, and Lynn has the topics about the transfers. Anything else? Or any other business that the board wants to consider this evening?
I just wanted to thank Mary for all of her hard work with the socks and making sure that all of our teachers got socks with little notes on them. It was very thoughtful, and we so appreciate you, Mary, so thank you.
I did get a text
Thanks,
message
Emily.
from
And
Mary
a shout out
saying,
to Erin. What text message was that I was having a nervous breakdown?
So many socks. Whose idea was this? I know that pulling it off was probably a bigger animal than you had anticipated, but I think that it was so well received. Everybody was really thankful for that. So, maybe you'll perfect it for next year, ladies.
Oh, I think I'll let someone else carry forward the torch of the sock order if we go that route again.
We already know what we're going to do differently.
I have to tell you, I have never heard more comments of appreciation from teachers than I did this year. Everybody loves Darn Tough socks, and they were so thrilled to receive those for appreciation gift.
Yeah. The very first year that the VSBA did that for board members, I felt like I'd won the lottery. I was so excited. So I know how they feel. That was fantastic.
I do have one question for possible future board business.
Sure.
So I know last year we had reviewed the handbooks, I think after school has started, and we had discussed reviewing them before the start of the fall school year. So I just didn't know if that was something that would still happen.
So I'm going to be honest on that one, Catherine. We had that in our April. I had that scheduled for our April leadership team, and we have not done that work yet, given what we have been focusing on. So I hope that the principals can put their books together and have those conversations. In terms of the alignment, we certainly can try to get our handbooks in earlier than last year. However, I'm a little worried about what we're going to have to put in those handbooks in connection to how school is going to be in the fall. So I think that the alignment piece might not be the priority this year as much as it is about capturing what our procedures and systems are going to look like. That part I think can be really aligned, because how that's going to play out in our schools is going to be pretty aligned. I just don't want to overpromise for our principals, because the load has been super heavy for all of them. So we won't lose sight, though, I promise. Next year I'll make sure it gets in the calendar.
Lynn, I think also, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the thought was that we were approving those handbooks without reading them. And so the hope is that we would get to see them before they were brought to us to approve before the school year opens. So I know alignment is one piece, but I think also is just being able to have a chance to look through them, or at least a highlight of what would be changing before we have to sit and approve them.
Okay. So I think the tricky part is your August board meeting happens August 5th. And that's 3 weeks, 4 weeks before the school year starts. So I don't know that they always have them ready then. I think that's why we butted up against that last year. I think they could try to give you what they have on August 5th, but I have a worry in my mind that we'll still be working on unpacking guidance by then for this year.
Do they have to go out right away at the beginning of the year? Can you wait till the September board meeting?
What do principals think about that?
Because I know August is going to come with a lot of change. So, I mean, even just with all of the COVID stuff, waiting and.
I feel like right now, I don't know as though my handbook will change a lot from what it is right the second. I mean, I know there's a couple policies, a couple of things in there, categories, not policies, that I would like to compare with the other principals. But I mean, right now, you all have the handbooks that we gave you in, was it September? So, I mean, if you wanted to look at them now, and then we could show adjustments, I don't know.
What we could do is the principals and I have a meeting in the morning, and you can help remind me that we're going to start talking about summer leadership, and I have a meeting with Jody and Michelle, two of our SU administrators, to begin that planning. So we could try to strategically set aside a chunk of time for you guys to be able to talk about your handbooks. And I don't think it's unreasonable, Aaron, to ask to be able to see them in advance of approval. I don't know. I think they could get them to you electronically before they go out, but I don't know yet if they're going to want to wait to pass those handbooks out a week after kids are back in school. Typically those go out either before they get to school or on that first day. So that's the tricky part. Unless the board wanted to have a special meeting closer to the end of August to be able to review those. That's another option we could talk about.
And teachers utilize them at the beginning of the school year to go through some of those things with students. So that's what they count on that first week or so of school too.
Yeah, I also forgot you guys we're starting a little bit earlier this year too.
Yeah, we start on August 26th.
Lynn, do you think it makes sense or to potentially kind of have two handbook? I mean, if we don't get around to unifying and having one NMVU handbook, which I think is what we had kind of talked about briefly last year, with all the COVID related stuff, it almost seems to me that should be a separate kind of document that is almost SU wide, because all of that kind of guidance is going to be uniform across the board, and seems as though that may be better as a standalone second document that everyone gets, because I assume that's what you were talking about, that some of that is going to be embedded in the handbooks.
So that will be separate, Mary. Like the COVID stuff, our reopening plan, that will be specific, and that will be at the SU level for all of our schools, but some of that will be counter to what their handbooks say. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Because the structures are going to look so different in the fall that I think that they're going to have to make changes in their handbook potentially, or put some clauses in about what it would look like in each of the phases. I think
Gotcha.
there's definitely, I'm glad you brought this up tonight because of all the questions and all the buckets that we've been trying to anticipate. I really, really have not let my brain think about handbooks yet. So I'll add it to the bucket list.
And just to add one little tidbit on to that, I don't want to take up too much more time, but I guess the biggest thing, or not biggest, but one thing that comes to mind and is all tied together with the COVID stuff is sort of the attendance piece of it, which I'm assuming will probably be talked about. But with things looking so differently as far as, you know, potentially kids going home a lot more if they have the sniffles, like someone was bringing up earlier. So how does that change our attendance policies and expectations?
So that is something, Catherine, that I know will be included in the guidance that we're going to be receiving, because we're also going to be in a situation where we're going to have children who fall into one of the high risk categories who won't be returning for that reason. So they might be in a remote model, even though some of their school age kids are in an in-person model. And we'll have more of the day-to-day attendance issues where kids can't come because they're symptomatic when a parent typically would have sent them if they had those types of symptoms. And I think that, you know, we're definitely looking for some guidance in that area, because it has been challenging to navigate what the expectations were around attendance during a remote learning phase. So as we're planning for those multiple contingencies, that's going to get really complicated to think about what does that look like and what are our expectations around that. For this time period, those expectations were definitely guided by direction we received at the state level around attendance and how to attend to that. So I would assume that we'll be getting some pretty specific guidance about that from the agency. I hope sooner rather than later, I might add.
I just wanted to say that I feel like there's so many projects that we all were working on in all of our parts of our lives, our work lives and our school board lives and every other part of our life, that need to have some sort of disclaimer attached to them that says, well, this is what the plan was. And then the entire thing went out the window when COVID hits. So we can't fault anybody for the fact that I'm just impressed that Kat had the memory of the handbooks to bring it up now. I appreciate that. But you guys, it's okay. Like, don't feel bad that you put the handbook on the back burner. We get it. So anything else that we want to add to our agenda for next time? Okay. Does someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I will.
Okay, thank you. Do we want to vote on that, or shall we all just exit the meeting as our form of voting? Thank you all. Enjoy the next few weeks of summer. We'll, I guess, see you in July.
Have a great